Welcome to Mr. Magazine, the channel that strips celebrity life of its lacquer to reveal the tender, often painful truth beneath. If you value stories told with care and courage, hit like, subscribe, and consider pressing join to back our work. Your support keeps these voices alive. Today's feature peels back the velvet rope around one of Turkey's most private stars, and what you're about to read is written to be heard, felt, and discussed. Behind the public poise and the impeccably curated images, actress Cemre Arda chose, finally, to speak without armor. In an interview that has rippled through Turkish media and beyond, she abandoned the practiced silence that had shielded her and allowed listeners a close, unvarnished view of a private battle, an arduous, emotional pursuit of motherhood that had consumed years of her life. Her language was not performative. It carried the weight of someone who'd lived through recurring hopes and griefs until the two braided into a single, aching story. She framed those years not as a linear tragedy but as a persistent negotiation between time, biology, and a stubborn longing. It was, she admitted, a contest in which every beat of the clock felt like a verdict. The admission reframed public memory of her relationship and career, not as a sequence of milestones, but as a map of ruptures and recoveries. For a long stretch, Cemre and her partner, actor Gökberk Yildirim, projected a unity that the tabloids celebrated and fans admired. Their image was a duet of complicity, co-stars who weathered rumors and rewrites with what looked like easy solidarity. Yet those snapshots, she revealed, had been taken while two people were quietly negotiating an impossible private problem. Treatment cycles became calendar markers that defined months not by work or travel but by procedure and prognosis. Each negative test was not merely disappointing, it was a subtraction from an imagined future. We learned to read disappointment like weather, a forecast you could neither fully prepare for nor ignore, she said, describing a ritual of hope followed by ritualized grief that the cameras never captured. Gökberk's presence, she insisted, was not performative consolation but a daily, quiet sturdiness. Yet even steadfastness can strain. She described stretches when silence replaced conversation, not because of coldness but because exhaustion had turned language into something brittle. In those silences, she learned that love is not always about solving problems together, but sometimes about holding one another when solutions do not arrive. The chronology of their attempts reads like a slow-motion study of hope. Medical interventions, each promising, each failing, became chapters of a long, unglamorous narrative. Cemre recounted procedures, the sterile corridors of clinics, and the cycles of waiting that stretched between them. Losses followed, each one engraving itself into her memory with a permanence that would not fade. Still, she emphasized, resignation never fully took hold. Even after the most devastating setbacks, a small ember of belief remained. I learned to give grief its own space while refusing to let it be my only language, she reflected. That tension, between allowing pain to exist and refusing to be defined by it, shaped the way she coped, performed, and loved. Then, unexpectedly, science offered an opening. A new treatment, described by doctors as offering a low but significant chance, arrived like a sliver of daylight after a long storm. Cemre called it a miracle disguised as science, a phrase that hints at the place where rational medicine and human longing intersect. Receiving the news was an uncommodified outburst of relief and disbelief, prayerful tears, frantic exultation, and a private celebration that the couple kept between themselves at first. That fragile new possibility did not erase the past, but it altered how she measured the future. Gratitude, she said, became the axis of her outlook, gratitude not for guaranteed outcomes, but for the capacity to keep trying, to keep loving, and to keep believing in the fragile architecture of hope. Cemre's decision to speak out did more than disclose private details, it challenged a culture that prefers celebrities maintain polished silence. Her openness invited both empathy and critique. Some accused her of exposing too much, others praised her bravery. She answered both reactions with a steady insistence on dignity. "I never wanted my pain to be a spectacle. I wanted it to be real." Her vulnerability, she believed, was a service to other women who suffer in private. Social media replies underlined that belief as messages poured in, women sharing their own miscarriages, their own lonely nights in sterile waiting rooms, and the gratitude of having seen their experience mirrored by someone in the public eye. For many, Cemre's confession clarified that suffering need not be anonymous to be dignified. The couple's bond did not fracture so much as transform. What had once been youthful certainty matured into a quieter, more resilient partnership. They learned new modes of intimacy, a shared joke that broke a heavy mood, a ritual that marked the end of each medical cycle, a small domestic routine that reaffirmed their mutual care. "This kind of maturity," she said, "does not erase pain but teaches a different way to inhabit it. We learned the vocabulary of support without always having the grammar of answers," she revealed. That linguistic metaphor, support without explanation, is telling. It suggests a relationship that chose companionship over closure, partnership over performance. Cemre's post-confession life has a forward trajectory that turns private agony into public advocacy. She has publicly allied herself with campaigns for fertility education, miscarriage awareness, and adoption support. By leveraging her visibility, she aims to change the environment that made silence feel necessary. If there is a lesson that threads through Cemre's narrative, it is this: motherhood is not a single metric measured by childbirth alone. She has reframed motherhood to include emotional labor, resilience, spiritual tending, and the ways one nurtures life in many forms. "Mothering can begin in the choices we make toward tenderness," she explained, a formulation that broadens the term into a human capacity rather than a biological endpoint. Her words resonate because they relieve the pressure of biological determinism. They offer instead a spacious view of identity. A life can contain the wish for children and also contain other forms of generative meaning. On Mr. Magazine, we want to hear from you. What do you think of Cemre's decision to speak so openly? Which celebrities would you like us to cover with the same sensitivity and depth? Tell us in the comments, and if you're moved, press like, subscribe, and join. Your engagement shapes which stories we can afford to tell. Cemre Arda's story has no neat final paragraph. It is a continuing narrative of attempts, losses, and unexpected consolations. But what remains unmistakable is the heart she brought to her confession, a heart that insisted on dignity, on gratitude, and on the courage to continue loving through and beyond sorrow. She closed her interview with a simple, resolute sentence, that motherhood, in its fullest sense, is measured by the capacity to keep loving when outcomes disappoint. It is a thought at once private and universal, love as an act of persistence rather than a reward. Thank you for joining this deep listen into a life lived publicly yet felt privately. If this feature moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and click join to support more stories that matter. Tell us below, would you like a follow-up piece focused entirely on Gökberk Yıldırım's perspective and how the couple navigates life now, a second installment in the same magazine style? Which Turkish celebrities' untold stories should we bring to light next on Mr. Magazine? We read every comment. We respect every voice. See you in the next story, where vulnerability meets attention, and where human stories find the space they deserve.